You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, a major scandal has just rocked the Trump campaign. It's being reported that hackers have stolen internal communications from that campaign. The campaign is blaming foreign sources hostile to the United States, and they cited a Microsoft report from Friday that Iranian hackers sent a phishing email to a, quote, high-ranking official on a presidential campaign. First of all, so as not to bury the lead here, is it legal for foreign actors to infiltrate and then hack a campaign to mine materials?
Yeah, the answer would be no. We have cyber hacking crimes on the books. It violates any number of federal laws, may also violate some state laws. So, no. Hacking by anybody, foreign actors or not, is something that could lead to criminal investigations and prosecutions. But I will say, Brian, in my experience as a prosecutor, they rarely do lead to criminal prosecutions. Sometimes they lead to investigations. Occasionally they lead to prosecutions. But hacking is so prevalent, and, now that it is apparently coming to the Trump campaign, you reap what you sow, because when I read this article, I couldn't help but hear in the back of my mind Donald Trump saying, hey, Russia, if you're listening, find the emails. He invited foreign hacking, foreign interference back in the 2016 presidential election, and now it looks like those, cyber hacking chickens are coming home to roost.
And I do want to get to that in a moment, but real quick, just on this issue at hand, is there anything from stopping Politico, because that's where the materials were sent, is there anything stopping Politico from publishing what they're being sent?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is it depends on what they're being sent. So first of all, if some nefarious actor hacks into a website or a computer system and just collects up a bunch of information, for example, from the Trump campaign, it's being reported that, among other things, some of the materials that a hacker gave over to Politico were vetting materials on J.D. Vance and maybe Marco Rubio, but they came from publicly available sources. So Politico probably would not be violating any laws if they weren't responsible for the hack, they didn't encourage the hack, they weren't in a conspiracy to hack, they simply published what the hacker provided to them. Now, is that a good journalistic practice? Is it moral? Is it ethical? Those are different questions, but it's unlikely that Politico would be criminally investigated or prosecuted. The exception to that is if what was hacked was, for example, classified information, national defense information, which could give rise to an espionage charge. If somebody comes into possession of that and they mishandle it or they disseminate it, even if it came from a hacker and they weren't responsible for the hack, it could be that they could be on the hook for criminal liability. But that's not what's being reported here. So we don't know if Politico is going to decide to publish it or not. I don't believe they have thus far. There's been some talk about what they came into possession of from this hacker. But generally speaking, they're not going to be on the criminal hook if they publish.
Okay, now let's go back to what you were alluding to before, and that is that Donald Trump very famously made hay of the trove of Clinton emails that were leaked in 2016, which was then attributed to Russia. WikiLeaks then published them in the lead up to the 2016 election, and in a more recent interview with George Stephanopoulos in 2019, Donald Trump actually pushed back on the idea that a candidate should report information on an opponent if it came from a foreign agent, even denying that it would count as election interference altogether. He said, quote, "It's not interference. They have the information. I think I'd take it." So by Trump's own logic, shouldn't the Harris campaign just be able to wield what's exposed for their own partisan benefit here?
If they want to follow the advice of Donald Trump, they could certainly do that. I, for one, would not act in accordance with how Donald Trump said he would act if he came into possession of,
That's pretty good legal advice. That's pretty good legal advice all around.
Yeah, listen, we know that there is no law Donald Trump won't violate if violating that law acts to his advantage, enriches him, right? But listen, I don't believe for a minute the Harris campaign would comport itself and behave the way Donald Trump or his campaign would behave. But, look, it does feel like just desserts, right? When Donald Trump urged Russia to basically find Hillary's missing emails, and what happened immediately thereafter, we know from some of what we learned from Mueller's investigation, Russia launched an attack, a phishing attack. They started to try to hack. They started to try to take Donald Trump up on his offer to join him by interfering in a presidential election, something for which Donald Trump has still never been held accountable, which I think is unconscionable. But like I say, now it's coming home to roost. And if you'll remember, when we think back to 2016, Brian, there were reports that Russia was hacking, and they hacked both the DNC and the RNC. And what did they choose to leak? What did they choose to sort of let the politicians over here exploit? The stuff they hacked from the DNC. But you know what never saw the light of day? The stuff that Russia reportedly hacked from the RNC. I ask you, who was Russia trying to help, and who was Russia trying to hurt by operating that way?
Absolutely. Glenn, do you think that the Trump campaign will try to use this as some predicate to claim election interference in their broader goal to undermine the election results, just like they did last time?
Brian, bingo. When I read the Politico report, the first thing that came to mind after, hey, Russia, if you're listening, it was that I am not prepared to believe a claim from Donald Trump or his spokesperson, Stephen Chung, or the campaign at all, that foreign actors are interfering in this election to Donald Trump's detriment, because immediately my mind leapt to, that's going to be Donald Trump finding another way to try to undermine the voters' confidence in the outcome of the results of an election that it looks like he is about to lose badly. He'll start screaming, oh, foreign interference, that's why I lost. So I am not yet fully prepared to accept what is being reported out. Of course, there were some indications in the reporting that there are some Microsoft reports that seem to indicate there was some foreign activity, perhaps by the Iranian government. That might be who is behind these hacks. But I'm going to take a wait and see approach to this information until we learn more about it.
Right. I mean, we've heard thus far that the Trump campaign is willing to go to insanely long lengths to help themselves in this next election. I mean, they are openly courting election deniers in Georgia and states across the country. We've read from some bombshell reporting in the Rolling Stone, for example, and it was Justin Glaw who was the author of that, and I interviewed him on this channel. We read that there are as many as 70 election deniers who are currently in positions of power as county level elections officials who are either election deniers or who have prevented certification in the past. And so there are a lot of ways that the Trump campaign is basically using to help themselves in this upcoming election. And so the last thing we should do is think, for example, that they wouldn't exploit this avenue as well to help themselves in the upcoming election.
Yeah, and I also saw that reporting about the 70 election deniers in some of the positions in the state election systems. And regardless of the popular vote in their state, they might refuse to certify Kamala Harris's win. But you know what? That didn't work the last go-round, Brian. Right. Actually, the courts held strong, both the federal courts and the state courts. The Supreme Court didn't even accept review of those cases. And I have to believe that the courts will hold again, notwithstanding some of what our Supreme Court has done recently that has, sort of inured to the benefit of Donald Trump. So you know what? Let these Republican election officials in the states do their worst. I do not think they will be successful in their nefarious attempts to say, well, then we're just not going to certify the election's results. We've got the Mark Eliases of the world and others who will be prepared to go into court and win that battle 10 times out of 10.
Absolutely. Absolutely on the Mark Elias front, and then absolutely on the fact that we're all becoming privy to it before it happens. So by virtue of them kind of broadcasting their plans and us recognizing that it's going to happen before it happens, because we've seen their Facebook pages, we've seen their comments, we know that they're already planning on denying the election results before they've even happened, that will give us a big leg up in terms of not being surprised and in terms of showing any courts and arming with prosecutors with this information that these people had planned this all along. And that will only further undermine the cases that these Trump-aligned folks actually have. So I think that's why.
And Brian, let me add, what's happening to the election, the fake electors and the people who were involved in nefarious attempts to try to undermine the election's results in 2020? Well, they're being prosecuted in state after state after state. That will have a deterrent effect for some of the folks who might be toying with the idea of trying it all over again.
Well, I think it's especially important that we continue to get this into the zeitgeist, make sure more people know so that again, it doesn't give Republicans any advantage in terms of thinking that they're going to scoot in here and kind of execute their plans as if we're not expecting what's coming. So with that said, we will continue to cover this as much as we can. For those watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.